I wanted to show you some different techniques that you could use on your cookies. So the first one we're talking about is wet on wet. So basically this means that your bottom layer of icing is not dry yet. So you basically just flooded it. You go ahead either with a flood or an outline icing and you pipe right on top. Now what happens is it melts into the icing. So instead of having an icing layer on top of another, it basically becomes one smooth layer. So you can basically just pipe it straight in and let it melt in. Or you can use your scribe. Here on the cactus cookie, I'm kind of using my scribe just to give it a little bit of definition and texture in there. And you can do things like this, or you can leave it as is. The scribe is a huge tool that very simple, but it comes in handy for so many different things. And you'll see here on this yellow egg that I have, another use for the scribe, which makes a really, really cool design. And here I'm just piping several lines. The idea is kind of to use the same consistency that you're doing. So your flood is a looser icing. You also want to do your designs on top with looser icing so that they melt in together. Sometimes if I've cut my hole too big on my bag, or my icing is too loose and it's just flowing too fast for me to do specific designs or very detailed designs, I'll use my outline because it's a little bit thicker, but you kind of have to work fast with the outline because it doesn't sink in as well. But a few taps of the cookie sometimes helps. But here when they're the same consistency, it just melts really, really fast. A little tip as well is that when you're doing wet on wet and you're doing designs, let's say by pulling your scribe through, you want to kind of do them sections at a time. Sometimes when you do all the details on top and you try to go back with your scribe, that section kind of starts to dry a little bit. And with wet on wet, you have to kind of work a little bit quicker than normal. So if you have a fan blowing on your cookies to dry them, make sure that fan is not, blowing towards the one you're decorating, because that will kind of dry it quite fast. And it won't be fully dry, but you won't be able to get those, scribe lines through, or you won't be able to pipe and then it'll settle in. And so it'll kind of stay on top of your icing. So notice here I'm just doing section by section. Now we're going to show you what you can do with your tipless bag. So a common question I usually get is, why use tipless bags? What's the difference? Well, these are the type of things that you can do with tipless bags. So not only can you control your piping and your hole size, you can also do these really cool leaf designs. So here I'm just cutting an upside down V. So I'd like to have the seam in the middle, and I've cut one side at an angle, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut the other side. So sometimes you try to make it even. If it's not quite even, you can, turn it around and cut it again. Usually takes me a couple tries. And always, test out your hole size. You can do a couple of test runs, and if you like it and you're happy with it, it's all good. You can go ahead and do it on your cookie. And this is basically our leaf tip. So it's like an upside down V. The point is away from you. And this will give us a nice leaf. So you can kind of play with it and go up and down or push back and forth, which I'm doing here a little bit. And then at the end, you can just kind of pull away. It's very, very handy to do things like this, like leaves on a pineapple, or you can do on your flowers. And I'm using really, really stiff icing here because I want it to hold its shape. And they're really fun and quick to pipe, and they look fantastic. You can use the same method here for a mermaid tail, or if you have roses that need a few leaves to accompany it. So it's really endless what you can do with these tipless bags. And again, I'll show you another little tip that you can use with your tipless bags. So again, I'm going to do kind of the same cut, but just on one side. So I'm going to get my bag as flat as possible. I get it nice and flat. That way I'll have a more even cut, and my seam is going to be in the middle. So again, tipless bags usually have like one seam, not two. So that's when you have a good tipless bag. And then I'm going to cut it at an angle. And this will be our ruffle tip. And so the ruffle you can use for so many things, but here I'm going to use it on a pie. So again, you kind of play around with how to hold the bag with having the long sort of end down or flipping it up, and you can see you get a little bit of a narrow on the top. So here I'm going to do the pie crust, and I'm just kind of going back and forth or up and down depending which way you're looking at it. And again, I always usually practice on a paper towel, just get the feeling of the flow of how the icing's coming out, if it's thick enough, how the bag's going to kind of come out, and how much I have to sway back and forth or up and down, how slow, fast, how much pressure. I always give it a few test runs, and then I'll go ahead on my cookie. And again, this is with really thick icing, but it's a great way to use your tipless bags for all sorts of different ways. And here I'm using the exact same tip I just did the ruffles with. One side is slightly thicker and the other side is thinner, but you don't even notice it, just to finish off my pie crust. So again, even if you want kind of a flat line, this is a great way to do it as well. Tipless bags, you can do so many different things. That's why I love them so much. So I hope you guys learned something, and we'll see you in the next video. Happy baking!